The carriage wheels clattered over cobblestone as Eleanor Hartwell pressed her temple against the cool window glass, watching the gas lamps of London blur into golden streaks through her exhaustion. She had been travelling for 18 hours, first by train from her family's modest estate in Derbyshire, then by hired coach through the city's labyrinthine streets. Her aunt's letter had been insistent. "Come at once. A position has opened in Lord Ashford's household. It may be your only opportunity." Eleanor's eyelids felt weighted with sand. She had not slept properly in 3 days. Too anxious about this interview. Too aware that her family's dwindling finances depended on her securing respectable employment. At 27, she was considered well past the age of advantageous marriage, and her father's death 2 years prior had left them with little more than their name and a crumbling manor house. The carriage lurched to a stop before an imposing townhouse in Mayfair. Even through her fatigue, Eleanor recognized the neighborhood's exclusivity. Wrought iron gates gleamed in the lamplight, and the windows of Lord Ashford's residence glowed with warm amber light, despite the late hour. She gathered her worn travelling cloak around her shoulders and accepted the driver's hand as she descended. "Miss Hartwell." A stern-faced housekeeper opened the door before Eleanor could knock. "You are late. His lordship expected you at 9 o'clock. "I apologize," Eleanor said, her voice hoarse from disuse. "The train was delayed outside Reading." The housekeeper's expression did not soften. "Follow me. His lordship is in the library. He insists on interviewing all potential companions himself." Companions? The word settled strangely in Eleanor's mind as she followed the housekeeper through corridors lined with paintings that seemed to watch her pass. Her aunt's letter had mentioned the position was to serve as companion to Lord Ashford's elderly mother, but something about the household felt peculiar. Too quiet, too still, as if the house itself were holding its breath. The library doors opened onto a room that made Eleanor's heart ache with longing. Floor-to-ceiling shelves held thousands of volumes, their leather spines gleaming in the firelight. Persian rugs softened the floor, and wing-backed chairs were arranged near the hearth. But it was the man standing by the window who captured her attention entirely. Lord Ashford turned as she entered, and Eleanor's exhaustion seemed to lift for one suspended moment. He was tall, perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and eyes of such pale grey they seemed almost luminous in the firelight. His features were aristocratic, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips that suggested both severity and unexpected gentleness. He wore evening clothes with careless elegance, as if fine tailoring were simply his natural state. "Miss Hartwell." His voice was deep, cultured, with an unusual quality that seemed to resonate in her chest. "Please, sit." Eleanor moved toward the indicated chair, but her vision suddenly swam. The room tilted, and she grasped the chair's arm to steady herself. 3 sleepless nights and a day of travel had finally caught up with her. "Forgive me," she whispered. "I'm quite well, I assure you." "You're exhausted." Lord Ashford crossed the room with startling speed, his hand steadying her elbow. His touch, even through her sleeve, sent an unexpected warmth through her. "When did you last sleep properly?" Tuesday, I believe." Eleanor tried to focus on his face, but her eyelids were so heavy. "I apologize, my lord. This is terribly unprofessional." "Sit," he said again, his voice gentler now. He guided her to the chair. and Eleanor sank into its embrace with a small sigh of relief. The interview can wait. You need rest. But your mother, the position... Eleanor fought against the drowsiness pulling at her consciousness. She needed this employment. Her family needed it. Will still be available after you've slept. Lord Ashford moved to the sideboard and poured something from a crystal decanter. Here, this will help. Eleanor accepted the glass with trembling fingers. The liquid was deep red, and for a moment she thought it might be wine. But the taste was sweeter, some kind of fortified cordial with herbs she couldn't identify. Warmth spread through her immediately. "Thank you," she murmured. The firelight seemed to soften, and the chair felt impossibly comfortable. "You're very kind. Kindness has nothing to do with it." Lord Ashford returned to his position by the window, though his gaze remained on her. "I have no use for a companion who collapses from exhaustion." Eleanor tried to form a response, but her thoughts were becoming pleasantly fuzzy. The fire crackled softly. The chair seemed to enfold her like an embrace. She should remain alert, should maintain proper decorum, but her body had other intentions. "I'll just close my eyes for a moment," she heard herself say. Just a moment. Lord Ashford said something in response, but Eleanor was already drifting, consciousness slipping away like water through her fingers. She woke to the sensation of movement and warmth. Her cheek rested against something firm yet comfortable, and she could hear a steady rhythm. Not quite a heartbeat, but something similar, slower and deeper. The scent surrounding her was cedar and old books and something else. Something indefinably masculine and compelling. Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. She was no longer in the chair. She was being carried, her head resting against Lord Ashford's shoulder, his arms supporting her with surprising gentleness. Through her confusion, she noticed how effortlessly he held her, as if her weight were nothing at all. "My lord?" Her voice emerged as barely a whisper. He looked down at her, and in the dim light of the corridor, his eyes seemed to reflect the lamplight like a cat's. "You fell asleep in the library. I'm taking you to a guest room." "I can walk," Eleanor protested weakly, though she made no move to leave his arms. "This is highly improper. Propriety can accommodate necessity." His voice held a note of amusement. "Besides, there's no one to see us. The servants have retired for the evening." Eleanor knew she should insist on being set down, but something about being held by him felt inexplicably right, as if her body recognized a safety her mind couldn't yet comprehend. She noticed details she'd missed in the library, the unusual coolness of his skin even through his clothing, the way he moved with a grace that seemed almost inhuman, the absence of any breathlessness despite carrying her up 2 flights of stairs. "You are very strong," she said, her exhaustion making her incautious with words. "I've had practice." He shouldered open a door, revealing a beautifully appointed bedroom with a 4-poster bed draped in midnight blue silk. "This was my sister's room before she married and moved to Vienna, sir." He set Eleanor down on the bed with such care that she barely felt the mattress shift beneath her. She looked up at him, and in that moment, something passed between them. A recognition neither could name. A connection that defied the brief hours of their acquaintance. "Thank you," Eleanor said. "I don't usually... I'm not typically so human." The word seemed to slip out before he could stop it, and his expression shifted, becoming carefully neutral. "Vulnerable, I meant to say." You're not typically so vulnerable. But Eleanor had heard what he'd actually said, and something about it made her pulse quicken. She studied his face in the lamplight, the two perfect features, the eyes that seemed to hold centuries rather than decades, the way he stood so still that he might have been a statue. "Who are you?" she asked softly. "Truly?" Lord Ashford was silent for a long moment. Then he moved to the window, his back to her. "Someone who should not have allowed you to fall asleep on his shoulder. Someone who should have maintained proper distance." "Why?" "Because proximity to me is dangerous, Miss Hartwell." He spoke without turning. "Because I am not what I seem. Because you should take the first train back to Derbyshire tomorrow morning and forget you ever came to this house." Eleanor's exhaustion had fled, replaced by a curiosity that overrode her usual caution. "And yet you brought me here. You carried me with such gentleness. If you're truly dangerous, why show me such care?" He turned then, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. It was longing and restraint, desire and denial, all warring beneath his controlled exterior. "That is precisely the question I've been asking myself, Miss Hartwell, and I find I have no satisfactory answer." The air between them seemed charged with possibility. Eleanor knew she should look away, should remember her place, but she couldn't tear her gaze from his. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "the answer is simpler than you think." "Nothing about me is simple." Lord Ashford moved toward the door. "Rest now. We'll discuss the position in the morning, if you choose to stay." "Wait." Eleanor rose from the bed, swaying slightly. "Your mother, will I meet her tomorrow?" Something flickered across his face, grief, perhaps, or guilt. "There is no mother, Miss Hartwell. That was a convenient fiction. The position is to serve as my companion, to manage my household, to provide conversation, company, the presence of another living soul in these halls." The way he said living made Eleanor's skin prickle with awareness. "I see. And why would a gentleman of your standing require such an arrangement?" "Because I am alone," he said simply. "Because I have been alone for longer than you can imagine. Because when you fell asleep against my shoulder in the library for the first time in 200 years, I remembered what it felt like to be trusted." The confession settled between them like sediment between them. 200 years. The words should have sounded mad, should have sent Eleanor running from the room. Instead, they settled over her like the final piece of a puzzle, clicking into place. "You're no human," she said. It wasn't a question. "No." Lord Ashford met her gaze steadily. "I am not. And now that you know, you should leave. I'll provide funds for your journey and a reference for other employment. You need never—" "What are you?" Eleanor interrupted. Her heart was racing, but not with fear. With something else entirely. A strange exhilaration, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for something extraordinary to happen. He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her reaction. "The word you're thinking of is vampire, though that term carries connotations that are largely inaccurate. I don't hunt humans. I don't kill. I subsist on animal blood and the willing donations of those few who know my nature. I've spent the last century trying to atone for the monster I once was." Eleanor should have been terrified. Every rational part of her mind screamed that she should flee, should call for help, should do anything except stand there calmly considering his words. But she had always trusted her instincts more than rationality, and her instincts were telling her something entirely different. "You said I fell asleep on your shoulder," she said slowly. "In the library, I don't remember that. You were sitting in the chair and I was explaining the household routine. Mid-sentence, your eyes closed and your head tilted sideways. I moved closer intending to wake you, but instead..." He paused, and something vulnerable crossed his features. "Instead, you leaned into me, rested your head on my shoulder as if it were the most natural thing in the world, and I found I couldn't bring myself to disturb you." "How long?" 20 minutes. I stood there, perfectly still, while you slept, listening to your breathing, feeling the warmth of you, remembering what it was to be human, to be trusted with something precious." Eleanor's hand went to her throat, an unconscious gesture. "And you weren't tempted to feed from you?" Lord Ashford's voice was gentle. "Miss Hartwell, Eleanor, I have not fed from a human in over 100 years. And even if I were still that creature, even if I hadn't learned control, I would have died myself before harming you. From the moment you walked into my library, exhausted and determined and so achingly alive, I knew you were someone I would protect, not prey upon." The use of her given name sent warmth through Eleanor's chest. "Why?" "I don't know." He moved closer, drawn despite himself. "Perhaps because you looked at my books with such longing. Perhaps because you apologized for your exhaustion even as you swayed on your feet. Perhaps because when I touched your arm to steady you, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. The desire to care for another person, to be worthy of their trust." Eleanor found herself moving toward him as well, closing the distance between them. "I should be frightened of you. Yes. I should run from this house and never look back. Absolutely. But I don't want to." She stopped directly before him, close enough to see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his pupils dilated as he looked at her. "I want to understand. I want to know how someone becomes what you are. I want to hear the story of 200 years. I want to know what changed you from monster to man." Lord Ashford raised his hand slowly, as if giving her time to retreat, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers were cool, but not unpleasantly so, and his touch was achingly gentle. "You should want none of those things. You should want a normal life with a normal man, children, a future." "I've never wanted normal things," Eleanor said truthfully. "I've always felt like I was waiting for something extraordinary, something impossible. And now here you are, telling me you're a vampire. And all I can think is that finally, my life is beginning." His hand cupped her cheek, and Eleanor leaned into the touch without thinking. "You don't know what you're saying. The isolation, the secrecy, the constant vigilance. I've been isolated my entire life," Eleanor interrupted, too bookish for the local society, too poor for the London season, too strange for the neighbouring families. "I've spent 27 years feeling like I didn't quite fit anywhere. And now you're offering me a place in a world I didn't know existed, and you expect me to refuse. I'm offering you danger and loneliness, and a life lived in shadows. You're offering me yourself, Eleanor corrected softly, and that seems worth any risk. Lord Ashford closed his eyes, sir, and when he opened them again, they glistened with something that might have been tears, if vampires could weep. I have lived for 2 centuries, Eleanor Hartwell. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched everyone I ever loved grow old and die. I have walked through wars and plagues and revolutions. And in all that time, I have never met anyone who looked at me the way you're looking at me now. How am I looking at you? Like I'm not a monster, like I'm simply a man who's been alone too long. Eleanor reached up and covered his hand with hers, pressing it more firmly against her cheek. Perhaps that's exactly what you are. The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious. Then, Lord Ashford stepped back, though his hand lingered against her face for a heartbeat longer. You need to sleep, truly sleep, in a proper bed. Tomorrow, when you're rested and thinking clearly, we'll discuss this properly. And if you still wish to stay, if you still want to know my world, then I'll tell you everything, every dark chapter, every regret, every small redemption. I'll still want to stay? Eleanor said with quiet certainty. We'll see. He moved toward the door, then paused. Eleanor, thank you. For what? For falling asleep on my shoulder, for trusting me when you had no reason to, for looking at me like I'm worth knowing. Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. And Eleanor was alone in the beautiful bedroom, with her thoughts whirling like autumn leaves. She should have been terrified. She should have been planning her escape. Instead, she found herself smiling as she prepared for bed, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She had come to London seeking employment and found something far more extraordinary, a mystery, a connection, and perhaps, impossibly, the beginning of love. Eleanor woke to sunlight streaming through gauze curtains and the distant sound of birdsong. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the previous night's events flooded back. The library, the confession, Lord Ashford's cool fingers against her cheek, and she sat up abruptly. A vampire. She had spent the evening conversing with a vampire, had allowed him to carry her to bed, had stood close enough to touch him. The rational part of her mind suggested she might have dreamed the entire encounter, but the room around her was undeniably real, and her travelling dress lay neatly folded on a chair she didn't remember placing it on. A knock at the door made her jump. "Miss Hartwell, I've brought breakfast." The housekeeper from the previous evening entered with a laden tray. In daylight, her stern features seemed softer, and Eleanor noticed the woman's eyes held a shrewd intelligence. "His lordship requests your presence in the conservatory at your convenience. I've laid out one of Miss Catherine's dresses for you. You're nearly the same size, and she left several gowns behind when she married." "That's very kind." Eleanor accepted the tea gratefully. "Tell me, has Lord Ashford always been reclusive?" The housekeeper's expression didn't change, but her pupils contracted briefly. "His lordship values his privacy, miss. But he's a good master, fair, generous, and he needs—" She paused, seeming to choose her words carefully. "He needs someone who can see past surfaces, someone with courage and an open mind." "You know," Eleanor said quietly, "about his nature. I've served this household for 30 years, miss. I know many things. The housekeeper moved toward the door. The conservatory is on the ground floor, east wing. Take your time. An hour later, dressed in a beautiful morning gown of pale green silk, Eleanor made her way through the house. In daylight, she could appreciate the residence's unusual character. The windows were fitted with heavy drapes that could block all light. The mirrors were few and carefully placed. The artwork favored nighttime scenes and candlelit interiors. The conservatory was an unexpected oasis of green and light. Glass walls let in the morning sun, and plants of every description filled the space with a life and colour. Lord Ashford stood among the greenery, wearing dark glasses and gloves, examining a climbing rose with careful attention. "I didn't expect to find you here," Eleanor said. "I thought sunlight was dangerous." He turned, and even through the dark glasses, she could feel the intensity of his gaze. "Dangerous, yes. Deadly, no. It weakens me considerably, makes me vulnerable, but I've always loved growing things. This conservatory is my small rebellion against my nature." Eleanor moved closer, studying the roses. They were an unusual variety, with petals that shaded from deep crimson to palest pink. "They're beautiful." "I've been cultivating this strain for 40 years. Lord Ashford removed his glasses, revealing eyes that looked tired in the daylight, the pale grey less luminous than they'd been by lamplight. "I call them Eleanor roses, though I only named them this morning." "You named a rose after me?" Eleanor felt warmth bloom in her chest. "Why?" "Because you're like them. Delicate in appearance but surprisingly resilient. Beautiful but uncommon. And because I wanted something living to bear your name, in case you decide to leave, and I never see you again." Eleanor reached out and touched one of the blooms, feeling the silk-soft petals against her fingertips. "I told you last night I wouldn't leave. You were exhausted and overwhelmed. I thought perhaps in daylight, with a clear head, you might reconsider." He set down his gardening tools and removed his gloves. "I would understand, Eleanor. I would provide for your family, ensure you never wanted for anything. You need not sacrifice yourself out of some misplaced sense of adventure." "Is that what you think this is?" Eleanor turned to face him fully. "A young woman's foolish romanticism? A desire for adventure? Isn't it?" "No." She moved closer, and he didn't retreat. "It's recognition, Lord Ashford. From the moment I walked into your library, I felt something I've never felt before. Like I'd finally found where I was meant to be. And when you told me what you are, that feeling didn't disappear. It intensified. Because suddenly everything made sense. The way you move, the way you speak, the sadness in your eyes. You're not playing at being mysterious. You're simply trying to survive with grace in a world that's no longer yours." Lord Ashford was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "My name is Sebastian. Sebastian Ashford. I was born in 1653, the third son of an earl. I was turned in 1682 by a vampire who saw me as nothing more than a plaything. I spent the next 50 years as a monster, feeding on humans, reveling in my power, believing myself superior to mortal cattle." Eleanor listened without interruption, hearing the pain beneath his measured words. "Then I met a woman named Margaret," Sebastian continued. "A governess, poor and plain and utterly unafraid of me. She saw what I was and didn't run. Instead, she asked me why I chose to be a monster when I could choose to be something else. That question changed everything. She taught me that immortality without purpose is simply an extended death. That power without compassion is just cruelty. She saved me, Eleanor. Not from what I am, but from what I'd become. What happened to her? She grew old. I watched her marry, have children, become a grandmother. I provided for her family, anonymously, ensured they wanted for nothing. And when she died at 73, I held her hand and thanked her for giving me back my humanity. Sebastian's voice was rough with emotion. That was 120 years ago. Since then, I've tried to live as she taught me. With purpose, with compassion, with the hope that I might somehow atone for the lives I took. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. You loved her. I did. Not romantically. She never saw me that way, and I respected her too much to press the matter. But I loved her as one loves a teacher, a guide, a friend. She was the first person in my vampire existence to treat me as if I still had a soul worth saving. And now? Eleanor asked softly. Do you believe you have a soul worth saving? Sebastian looked at her, and the vulnerability in his expression made her heart ache. When you fell asleep on my shoulder last night, I felt something I haven't felt since I was human. Peace. Contentment. The simple joy of being trusted. And I thought, perhaps there's still something in me worth redeeming. Eleanor closed the remaining distance between them and took his hand. His skin was cool in the sunlight, and she could feel the faint tremor of weakness the daylight caused. You don't need redemption, Sebastian. You need acceptance. You need someone to see all of you, the monster you were, the man you've become, the immortal creature you'll always be, and choose you anyway. Eleanor, I choose you, she said firmly. I choose this strange, impossible situation. I choose a life in shadows and secrets. I choose you, Sebastian Ashford, exactly as you are. Sebastian raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent warmth radiating up her arm. You don't know what you're offering. The loneliness, the constant vigilance, the knowledge that everyone around us will age and die while we remain unchanged. We? Eleanor interrupted. You said we. He froze, realized what he'd revealed. I shouldn't have presumed. Do you want me to stay? Eleanor asked. Not as a companion or an employee, but as something more. Do you want me in your life, Sebastian? More than I've wanted anything in 2 centuries, he admitted, but wanting and having are different things. I can't offer you a normal life, Eleanor. I can't give you children or a place in society or the simple pleasures of a mortal existence. I don't want those things, Eleanor said. I want books and conversation and roses named after me. I want to hear stories of 200 years. I want to help you tend this conservatory and manage your household and be the person you trust enough to fall asleep beside. I want you, Sebastian. Just you. Sebastian pulled her closer, and Eleanor went willingly into his embrace. His arms encircled her with careful strength, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the slow, steady rhythm that wasn't quite a heartbeat. I can't believe you're real, he murmured against her hair. I can't believe you're here in my arms, choosing this life. Believe it, Eleanor said, because I'm not going anywhere. They stood together in the conservatory, surrounded by living things and morning light, 2 souls finding unexpected solace in each other's presence. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Sebastian Ashford allowed himself to hope. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Eleanor had ever experienced. Sebastian was a patient teacher, introducing her to his world with careful consideration for her comfort. He showed her the hidden vampire society that existed beneath London's surface, not the monsters of Gothic novels, but a community of immortals who'd learned to live alongside humanity with discretion and care. She met Sebastian's oldest friend, Lord Thaddeus Blackwood, a vampire who'd been turned during the Crusades and now ran a charitable foundation that provided medical care to London's poor. She met Lady Catherine Ashford, Sebastian's sister, who visited from Vienna with her mortal husband and spoke frankly about the challenges and joys of a mixed marriage. "He'll never age," Catherine said over the tea one afternoon, her hand resting on her rounded belly. "In 20 years, I'll be old, and he'll still look as he does now. But every moment with him is worth that eventual heartache." Love doesn't calculate costs, Eleanor. It simply is. But it was the quiet moments Eleanor treasured most. Evenings in the library, reading aloud while Sebastian listened with his eyes closed, a slight smile on his lips. Nights in the conservatory, tending the roses together, their hands brushing as they worked. Conversations that stretched until dawn, covering everything from philosophy to poetry to the small details of daily life. Sebastian courted her with old-fashioned patience, never pressing for more than she was ready to give. He brought her books from his extensive collection, commissioned a new wardrobe in colors that complemented her complexion, taught her to waltz in the empty ballroom at midnight. He was attentive without being possessive, protective without being controlling, passionate without being demanding. And Eleanor found herself falling in love, not with the romance of immortality, but with the man himself, with his dry humor and unexpected gentleness, with the way he listened as if her words were precious, with his dedication to being better than his nature demanded, with the loneliness she saw in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. 2 months after her arrival, Sebastian invited her to accompany him to a gathering of the Vampire Council. "They need to approve any long-term human companion," he explained. "It's a formality, but necessary. They'll want to ensure you're here of your own free will and that you understand the risks." The council met in an ancient manor house outside London, and Eleanor found herself facing 5 immortals whose combined ages exceeded 2,000 years. They questioned her extensively about her understanding of Sebastian's nature, her willingness to keep their secrets, her plans for the future. "And if Lord Ashford tires of you?" asked Lady Morgana, a striking vampire with hair like spun silver. "What then? You'll be too old for marriage, too strange for normal society, too aware of our world to ever truly belong to yours again." Eleanor met her gaze steadily. "Then I'll have had something precious for however long it lasted. I'd rather have a few years of extraordinary love than a lifetime of ordinary contentment." The council members exchanged glances. Then Lord Thaddeus smiled. "She'll do, Sebastian. She has the courage and the clarity of vision. We approve the arrangement." But as they left the manor house, Sebastian was unusually quiet. In the carriage, Eleanor took his hand. "What's wrong?" "Lady Morgana was right," he said heavily. "I'm being selfish, keeping you with me. You should have a normal life, Eleanor. A husband, children, a place in the world." "I have exactly what I want," Eleanor insisted. "I have you. For now. But what about in 10 years? 20. When you're 47 and I still look 32. When your friends are grandmothers and you're still playing companion to an immortal recluse. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. Sebastian, are you trying to protect me? Or are you trying to protect yourself from the pain of eventually losing me? He looked at her sharply. Both, perhaps. Then let me make this clear. Eleanor turned to face him fully. I know I'll age. I know I'll die. I know that loving you means accepting an ending that will hurt us both. But I'd rather have 20 years of loving you than 80 years of wondering what might have been. The question isn't whether I'll regret this choice. It's whether you're brave enough to accept what I'm offering. Sebastian pulled her into his arms, holding her with desperate tenderness. I'm terrified, he admitted, terrified of loving you and losing you, terrified of not being enough, terrified that my nature will somehow hurt you despite my best intentions. Fear is part of love, Eleanor said softly, for both mortals and immortals. The question is whether we let fear stop us from living. No. Sebastian cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. No, I won't let fear stop me. Not anymore. Eleanor Hartwell, I love you. I love your courage and your kindness and the way you look at my roses. I love your laugh and your stubbornness and the way you fall asleep during long books. I love you, and I want you in my life for as long as you'll have me. Forever, Eleanor whispered. I want forever with you, Sebastian, however long my forever lasts. He kissed her then, his lips cool and gentle against hers, and Eleanor felt something settle into place in her heart. This was right. This was real. This was worth any risk, any sacrifice, any eventual heartache. When they returned to London, Sebastian proposed formally, presenting her with a ring that had belonged to his human mother, a simple band of gold with a small ruby. It's not much, he said, not compared to what I could afford, but it's the only thing I have left from my mortal life, and I want you to wear it. Eleanor slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. It's everything, she said. It's you, giving me a piece of your past. What more could I want? They married quietly in the conservatory at midnight, with Lord Thaddeus officiating and Lady Catherine standing as witness. Eleanor wore a simple gown of ivory silk, and Sebastian wore the same evening clothes he'd worn the night they met. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when Sebastian kissed his bride, Eleanor felt as if her life had finally, truly begun. But their happiness was short-lived. 3 days after the wedding, Lord Thaddeus arrived with grave news. The council has reconsidered, he said heavily. Lady Morgana has convinced them that your marriage sets a dangerous precedent. They're demanding Sebastian choose, give you up, or face exile from vampire society. Eleanor felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her. Exile? What does that mean? It means I'd be cut off from all vampire resources and protection, Sebastian explained, his voice tight with controlled anger. It means any vampire who wished could challenge me without consequences. It means I'd be vulnerable in ways I haven't been since I was newly turned. Then we'll fight this, Eleanor said immediately. We'll appeal to the council, make them understand. There is no appeal, Lord Thaddeus interrupted gently. Lady Morgana holds significant influence. And she's convinced the others that human-vampire marriages weaken our security. I'm sorry, my friends. I argued against this decision, but I was outvoted. Sebastian was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "How long do we have?" 1 month. They expect you to dissolve the marriage and send Eleanor away with appropriate compensation. If you refuse... Lord Thaddeus trailed off, the implications clear. After he left, Eleanor and Sebastian sat together in the library, hands clasped, facing an impossible choice. "I won't let you be exiled," Eleanor said firmly. "I won't let you lose everything because of me." "You are everything," Sebastian nodded. "Without you, what does the rest matter?" "Your safety matters. Your place in the world matters. Sebastian, you've spent a century building a life of purpose and meaning. I won't let you throw that away." "Then what do you suggest?" His voice was raw with pain. "That I simply let you go? Pretend these months never happened? Watch you walk away and spend the rest of my existence remembering what I lost?" Eleanor was quiet, her mind racing. Then an idea began to form. Desperate, dangerous, but possible. What if I didn't walk away? What if I left, but with the promise of return? Sebastian looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "The council demands we separate. They don't specify for how long." Eleanor's words came faster as the plan took shape. "What if I went away? To the continent, perhaps? Or to America? What if I lived my mortal life, but with the understanding that when I'm old, when my time is nearly done, I'll come back to you, and then, if I still wish it, you could turn me. We'd have our forever, Sebastian. Just not yet." "Eleanor, no. I won't ask you to spend your life waiting for me." "You're not asking. I'm offering." She gripped his hands tighter. "Think about it, Sebastian. I'll have my mortal years. I'll travel, see the world, have adventures, but I'll always know I'm coming back to you. And when I do, when I'm ready to leave mortality behind, we'll be together truly, forever." "The council would never approve a turning," Sebastian said. But Eleanor could hear the hope creeping into his voice. "They don't have to approve what they don't know about," Eleanor said. "By the time I return, I'll be old, dying perhaps. Who would question a vampire showing mercy to an elderly woman? And once I'm turned, once I'm immortal, I'll be your equal in their eyes. They can't object to a marriage between two vampires." Sebastian pulled her into his arms, and Eleanor felt his body shake with suppressed emotion. "It's a terrible plan. Decades apart. You aging while I remain unchanged. The risk that something could happen to you, that you might change your mind, that the council might discover our intentions. It's the only plan that lets us both survive." Eleanor interrupted. "And it's not forever apart, Sebastian. It's just a very long engagement." He laughed despite himself, the sound half sob. "A very long engagement. 40 years, perhaps? 50? However long it takes." Eleanor pulled back to look at him. "I'll write to you, not directly, but through Lord Thaddeus. I'll tell you about my travels, my experiences, and you'll know I'm thinking of you always, that I'm coming back to you." "And if you meet someone else?" Sebastian asked quietly. "If you fall in love with a mortal man, have the normal life you deserve?" "Then I'll be honest with you," Eleanor promised. "I won't leave you waiting if my heart changes." "But Sebastian, it won't. I know myself. I know what I want, and what I want is you, for whatever forever we can have. They spent the remaining weeks preparing for their separation. Sebastian provided Eleanor with funds enough to live comfortably for decades, established accounts in her name across Europe, gave her letters of introduction to trusted contacts. Eleanor packed her belongings, said goodbye to the conservatory and the Eleanor roses, memorized every detail of Sebastian's face. On their last night together, they stood in the library where they'd first met. "I'll wait for you," Sebastian said, his voice breaking. "However long it takes, I'll wait. And when you return, I'll be here. Unchanged, constant, yours." "And I'll come back," Eleanor promised. "When I'm old and grey and ready to begin my forever, I'll come back to you, Sebastian Ashford. I'll fall asleep on your shoulder one last time as a mortal, and then I'll wake up as your equal, your partner, your eternal love." He kissed her then, a kiss that held all their longing and hope, and desperate faith in each other. And Eleanor kissed him back, memorizing the feel of his lips, the taste of him, the way his arms held her as if she were infinitely precious. The next morning, Eleanor boarded a train to Dover, beginning the journey that would take her across Europe and eventually to America. She didn't look back at the figure standing on the platform, though she could feel Sebastian's gaze following her until the train disappeared around a bend and Sebastian returned to his empty townhouse, to the conservatory full of roses named for the woman he loved, and began the longest wait of his immortal existence. 43 years later, on a cold November evening, a carriage stopped before the Mayfair townhouse. The door opened, and a woman emerged. Elderly now, her hair silver, her face lined with the years and experiences of a life fully lived. But her eyes were the same warm brown, and her smile held the same gentle courage. Sebastian stood in the doorway, looking exactly as he had the day she left. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the years and distance. Then Eleanor climbed the steps, moving slowly but steadily until she stood before him. "I'm home," she said simply. Sebastian's face crumpled with emotion. "Welcome home, dear." "Gone home, my love." He helped her inside, and they sat together in the library, in the same chairs where she'd once fallen asleep from exhaustion. Eleanor told him about her travels, the years in Paris, the decades in New York, the adventures and friendships and experiences that had filled her mortal life. And Sebastian listened, holding her aged hand in his unchanged one, grateful for every moment. "I'm ready now," Eleanor said as dawn approached, "ready to begin our forever." "Are you certain?" Sebastian asked. "Once it's done, there's no going back." "I've been certain since the night I fell asleep on your shoulder," Eleanor said. "I've been certain for 43 years. Don't make me wait any longer, Sebastian." So in the conservatory, surrounded by roses that had bloomed and faded and bloomed again through 4 decades, Sebastian Ashford transformed Eleanor Hartwell into an immortal. And when she woke 3 days later, young again and powerful and eternal, the first thing she saw was his face, and the first thing she felt was his hand in hers. As "Hello, husband," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in years. "Hello, wife," Sebastian replied, pulling her into his arms. "Welcome to forever." And so, dear listeners, Eleanor and Sebastian began their eternal life together. A life earned through patience and faith, through separation and reunion, through the courage to love despite impossible odds. They tend their conservatory still, growing roses and other beautiful things. They travel the world together, experiencing everything Eleanor missed during her mortal years. And sometimes, on quiet evenings, Eleanor falls asleep with her head on Sebastian's shoulder, just as she did that first night, and he holds her close and remembers how it all began. Love, you see, doesn't always arrive in the way we expect. Sometimes it comes in the form of an exhausted woman falling asleep during an interview. Sometimes it requires decades of waiting and faith. Sometimes it means choosing the impossible over the easy, the extraordinary over the ordinary. But when it's true love, the kind that transcends time and mortality, and all the obstacles the world can place in its path, it's worth every moment of waiting, every tear of separation, every leap of faith. So if you're waiting for your own impossible love, dear listeners, don't lose hope. Keep your heart open. Keep your courage strong. And remember that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin with the simplest gesture, like falling asleep on someone's shoulder and trusting them to keep you safe. Thank you for listening to this tale of immortal love and mortal courage. If you enjoyed Eleanor and Sebastian's story, please subscribe to our channel for more romantic tales of the supernatural. And until next time, my dear listeners, may you find the courage to choose love, even when it seems impossible. May you trust in the power of patience and faith. And may you always believe that true love, like Eleanor and Sebastian's, can transcend any obstacle, even time itself. Until we meet again in another story, another time, another tale of love that defies the odds. Sweet dreams, dear listeners. Sweet dreams.